be good to talk further about. One is what you describe is sort of the scale of the violence that was occurring, and that we didn't know, or that those of us who knew didn't seem to care. I wonder if you can talk a bit about those two things, about the scale and why it is that it wasn't broadly publicised, and maybe there's something you could read to help us understand.
Mm-hmm. Well, the scale, the Norwegian peace mediator in the peace process in Sri Lanka, Erik Solheim, recently said in London that this is probably the worst bloodshed of the 21st century. Everybody's heard of Srebrenica, but nobody's heard of Munavikel, which is where many more people died in 2009. So on a scale, if you take the figures from the United Nations who've looked into this, there's a panel of experts who looked at it, they said it was quite credible that 40,000 civilians had died in this 5-month period. And we're talking about an area that's minuscule. Sri Lanka's not a big island, and this is a very, very small area that the Tigers and civilians were crammed into. So for the most part, it was around 35 square kilometres, and it shrank to even, 9, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, as it got towards the end of the war. So you're talking about civilians, hundreds of thousands of civilians crushed into this tiny area, being pounded by supersonic jets, shells, heavy artillery, multi-barrel rocket launchers. So it was carnage on a pretty dreadful scale. One of the recent UN reports said that it was possible that 70,000 people died there, and it's upped the death count really substantially since I finished the book. And if that's the case, then we're talking about something on the scale of Syria, but condensed in speed into just 5-6 months, whereas Syria's been going on, 18 months, 2 years. So, really that's unprecedented to have that kind of killing in recent years, so speedily and so fast, and then to find nobody knows about it. Why does nobody know about it? Because the Sri Lankan government ensured that there were no independent witnesses there. They stopped journalists, aid workers, UN staff from going inside. They intimidated anybody who spoke out. They threatened them, they blackmailed them, they harassed them. And there were Tamil witnesses who spoke about it, who sent information out, but they weren't believed. They were considered to be partisan and biased. And I think the UN also failed in a major way, and that's been documented actually now by the UN itself. And they talked about how there were grave failures in Sri Lanka, and that several senior UN staff simply didn't see the protection of civilians as their duty or their responsibility. So this is from the UN, it's not just me saying this. And so many people believe this is Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, his Rwanda moment in a way.
Yes.
So why didn't people know about it? And now they do know. It's quite frustrating for people like me who have researched it, that it's not taken as seriously as it should be, because this sets a precedent for other countries to get away with the same sort of thing. They breached every law on war, and if people don't even take note, then another country can do it in another place.
And I'd like to come back to that because I think it's a really key issue, and I'd like to come back to the end. How are you going there, Niromi?
No, I'm all right.
Are you all right?
Sorry.
No, that's completely fine. Are you up for me asking you some further questions?
Yeah.
I guess there were early signs, I think, in your experience with the Tigers that they weren't quite as pure as you might have hoped. That there were moments along the journey where I think there was pause for thought, where you were witness to some actions on the part of the Tigers that you felt uncomfortable about. And I think there's a couple of examples that you may or may not want to talk about. But I'm wondering if you can talk about what was going on for you as a child, as a young woman, and what it was. So what was going on for you as a child, where you could both see the value in a group that was about providing safety for Tamils, but also could see some of the problems, but you sort of needed to overlook them to stay involved.
Yeah, and I think that is issue that all Tamils faced. It's one of those things that you sort of think, you look at the greater good is the way you justify it, because of course, these are young people who have taken up arms. Violence is the way of life because violence is perpetrated against us, and so we retaliate. So of course, there are going to be lots of things that are going to go wrong. Within the Tamil Tigers as well, because one of the things I talk about earlier in the book is that one of my distant relatives gets killed by the Tigers, and while I felt so upset and sad, I somehow disconnected that to the Tigers. I sort of thought, well, they killed him, my God, that's awful, and I felt really horrible. At the same time, I said, well, they are the Tigers, they are the ones who are going to save us. So
he was killed because he was a member of a rival faction.
Yes, he was a member of a rival faction, and the Tigers were pretty much, fighting. All the rival factions were fighting each other as well, so they got rid of them, and the Tigers got rid of them. So it was one of those things. I think as Tamils we tend to overlook a lot of those things because we had to. Without the Tigers, there was no hope for the Tamils. That's how we felt, and so and yet despite that, I just go and join. I go and put my hand up, and they actually didn't want to even consider me in the first time. And my friend and I tried to convince them, saying, we're going to die. We might as well do something and die. So you should take us in because we have passion, and we even upped our age a bit. And
you were very determined.
Yeah, we were very determined. Yes, because we thought we were going to save the world. So as 17-year-old girls would think, and unfortunately, they took us in, but with a lot of warning. They did give us warning that they said that, your life wouldn't be the same. It's going to be different. And we were like, oh yeah, we know all of that, but we didn't. And so once you're in, you constantly see the effects of violence in young people, what it does to them. How they deal with every little problem with violence. It happens in normal societies. Some individuals only know the way of violence, and in a place where violence is the way of life. So you see small conflicts. If they thought someone was a traitor, of course they're going to kill him. Things like that, and you then start to feel uncomfortable, and then of course the enemy will do something to you, and then you think, well, since they're doing this to us, we'll just have to, get on and kill them or fight with them. So. It's just this constant justification. And then I think something very important happened to me, when, first I see a little bit of violence within the group, and then my friend dies with so many other people around me, all my comrades. And I think that just sort of broke me and suddenly shook me into reality, and I felt, well, people keep going to die. They're going to die, and nothing good is going to come out of this. And I think that's the realization I came to after she died, after I watched her die right in front of me. And I think it's funny, something like that had to happen for you to wake up. And I still endured because there was no choice. I couldn't go back home because the army had taken territory, and by this time we were fighting the Indian peacekeeping forces. The Tigers were fighting the Indian peacekeeping forces. So I had to go and live in the jungle with the Tigers, and then again, of course, there's another murder within the group, and I think I just finally went, this is just not something that I can live with. And of course, there was other things as well, not just that, but also added was, starvation, we had no shoes, wearing the same clothes for 8 months by that time, didn't have a shower. It was just dreadful, you had nowhere to sleep. And I just couldn't cope. That was my thing. There were lots of other young people who just lived through all of that, and unfortunately died eventually. But I just couldn't cope, and they let me go.
You were quite lucky that they let you go.
Well, to me at that time it seemed a normal thing. I could go ask them saying I'm just going, and then they said, well, that's fine. Just be careful. We can't look after you. But then later on there was forced recruitment and all of those things that I read in your book as well. So.
And it was early on, and you were treated with you were given some special treatment. As a young woman, you were one of the first young women to be part of the combat part of the movement, and also you were very middle class, and so you were treated with some kid gloves in some ways.
Well, I'm embarrassed to sort of admit to that because you sort of think, they sort of treat you like, oh, you can't do this, you can't cope, are you all right? That's the thing. And one of the funniest things that we didn't realize it then, but in hindsight, that when we joined the Tigers, most of the girls would be sent to a barracks because by that time, the first group of girls have been trained in India and brought to Sri Lanka. And so if you joined, you will be actually sent to live with them for a while before you were sent to training. Whereas with my friend and I, they just sent us to this fisherman's hut to live with them for a while. And we thought, why are they sending us here? Maybe they don't like us. Maybe they think, they'll leave us here and they'll forget us. But in hindsight, we realized it was just a test to see whether we could just go and live with them and see whether we could cope. And we might say, oh, well, can't cope with this, we're going back home kind of thing. Which nearly came because it was just difficult, but Arjanthi, my friend, who kept saying to me, this is a test, we got to, get through this. And it was nothing compared to what was coming, but but they were kind. They were ordinary young people. It's a funny thing, people look at young people as terrorists. I guess they do terrorist acts, but they're just young kids who just decided one day they're going to go and save the world and picked up guns, and you lived with them day to day, they're just normal, and you would have come across a lot of them, And sometimes people say to me, well, if you're a former Tiger, how come you look like this? I'm like, what, you want me to wear army camouflage and walk with an AK in the suburbs of Sydney? It's just to prove, But we were just ordinary people who end up in extraordinary situations.
Yeah, I felt that very much when I met a lot of Tigers and got to know them, that I kind of consciously made the decision that I wouldn't judge their choice to take up arms, because I don't think that you can have the right to do that unless you've lived that kind of life. I mean, if you brought up in, like I was in London, and you have a peaceful life and you can expect a future, you can't judge somebody else who takes up arms and chooses armed struggle. It's impossible to know what it's like that would drive actually quite conservative people. Really not rebellious in any sense. To tip them over the edge to that point is impossible really to understand emotionally. I mean, you can go through the various triggers that different people have been through in their personal lives, but I don't think you can really judge that properly as an outsider.
Because to give up, the comfort of your home, because I've had a loving family, a good home, and we could have just, my mum said we're getting out and we're going down south until the war is over. I could have just done that. But you sort of, especially at that age, you feel a greater sense of responsibility, that you think that if everyone chipped in, we could do this. And being 17, I guess you don't have a sense of time. I thought if I just joined and helped them out, we might be able to attain Tamilelam, which is the separate state that we wanted, within a year, or two. I thought it would be just like that. But once you're there, you realize it's going to be prolonged, people are going to die, and this is just not the way it works out.